Cipher leaned against the modified Ducati, the engine still ticking from the ride. He had pulled it off, his first real heist, and now the rush was beginning to fade. But he knew this wasn't enough. A bike, some cash from pickpocketing, it was barely scratching the surface. What he needed now was scale. And for that, he needed someone who knew the streets like he knew the circuits. He thought of Reese. Reese had always been different. Not dumb, far from it. But his intelligence ran in a different direction. Cipher used to see him in school hallways, pulling off petty scams, selling pirated games on flash drives, unlocking phones for a fee, making fake IDs for students who wanted to sneak into clubs. He was the kind of guy who never did homework but always passed. Teachers called him a wasted potential, but Cipher saw something else. Survival instinct. Adaptability. Street-level precision. While Cipher spent his nights building drones and hacking into abandoned university servers to test his skills, Reese was studying human behavior, how to lie, cheat, and walk away smiling. If Cipher was a scalpel, Reese was a lockpick. Now, Cipher needed both. But Reese wasn't the kind of guy you just text and meet at a coffee shop. He'd gone underground after high school. Cipher had heard stories. Some said he ran with gangs. Others claimed he was fencing stolen tech. One rumor said he had once sold a modified credit card skimmer to a cartel. Cipher didn't know what was true, but he knew one thing. Reese had survived. Cipher started digging. Not online. Reese wouldn't leave a digital footprint. No social media, no bank records, no phone number. He began asking questions in the right places. Abandoned arcades turned into betting dens, vape shops with backroom poker nights, sketchy clubs with more cameras outside than lights inside. It took him a week to find Reese. He was holding court at a rundown bar on the city's west side. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and ego. The pool tables were worn down, but the cash on them was fresh. Reese sat at a corner booth with a poker table in front of him, sunglasses on indoors like some underground celebrity. Cipher didn't approach immediately. He stood by the bar, observing. Reese had a crew now, 3 guys who looked like they didn't blink unless paid to. But Cipher wasn't intimidated. He didn't need muscles. He had science. And he had a plan. Finally, when the table cleared, Cipher walked over. Reese looked up, eyebrows raising above his glasses. Well, the science kid. Thought you'd end up at NASA, not here? Cipher smirked. NASA ghosted me like every other tech company. Turns out intelligence doesn't count if you don't have a rich uncle. Reese leaned back, amused. So, what brings the future Elon Musk to my corner of hell? Cipher reached into his jacket, pulled out a wad of cash, clean, organized, and untouched by credit trail. He placed it on the table. I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to build something new. Something bigger. Reese picked up the stack, flicked through the bills with an expert's ease. Pickpocket money? And a stolen Ducati. That got his attention. Interesting, Reese said, folding his arms. So, you're not just another broke genius with a grudge. Cipher leaned in. I've studied physics, electrical engineering, cryptography, biometric security systems, some of it at college, most of it online. I can break into places most people don't even know exist. But I don't know how to fence what I steal. I don't know the right people to sell to. And I don't always know how to vanish in a crowd. Reese gave a short laugh. So you're asking for mentorship? No. I'm offering partnership. Reese tilted his head. What kind of jobs are you thinking? Smart jobs, Cipher replied. Not smash and grab. High-value targets, minimal risk, maximum return. I want to hit digital vaults, data farms, elite-level homes with cutting-edge security. And I want to do it without a single alarm ever going off. There was a pause. Reese slowly removed his sunglasses. For the first time, his eyes locked with Cipher's. You ever cracked a biometric vault? Cipher nodded. I built one in college. I also figured out 3 ways to bypass one without triggering a security ping, one involving thermal fingerprint reconstruction, another with micro-LED pulse mapping, and the third using a magnetic resonance exploit that'll only work on older models. Reese whistled low. Damn, you really went rogue. Cipher's voice dropped. I didn't go rogue. I evolved. The system left me behind, so I built my own. Reese tapped the table twice, deep in thought. Then he extended a hand. One rule, no heat. We don't get messy. We don't leave a trail. And if things go sideways, I disappear. Cipher shook his hand firmly. Agreed. But I don't plan on failing. They were partners now. But Cipher didn't waste time. As they left the bar, he started laying groundwork. I've been tracking a data recovery firm. Rich clients, sensitive information, and they store encrypted drives offsite. Most people think cloud is safer, but these guys know better. The drives are stored physically in a climate-controlled vault. Reese raised a brow. What's the score? Cipher grinned. One of their clients just paid them to secure a 3 petabyte quantum archive. Confidential black-budget tech files from a defense contractor. Worth tens of millions. Reese's eyes gleamed. That's not a score. That's a legend. Cipher nodded. Exactly. And I already have a blueprint of their building's internal cooling systems and an EM field map. Reese blinked. How? I posed as a freelance HVAC systems consultant. Walked in with a clipboard and a custom badge. Took some photos. Got their Wi-Fi handshake protocol too while I was there. Reese laughed in disbelief. You've really turned into a criminal, Cipher? Cipher's voice was calm. Cold. No, Reese. I've turned into what the world made me. Cipher had always believed knowledge was power. Now he was proving it, one calculated move at a time. He stood at his workbench in the cramped, dimly lit garage he now called his lab. The Ducati rested in one corner like a loyal steed, its matte black frame reflecting faint glimmers of fluorescent light. On the table in front of him lay a dissected smart lock, an IR motion sensor, a Raspberry Pi, and a thermal imaging camera he had bought with stolen cash. A makeshift Faraday cage surrounded his laptop. He wasn't taking any chances. This wasn't just some petty heist. This was Cipher's first real test of scientific application in the world of theft. Reese had given the green light. The data recovery firm was a prime target. It operated out of a secure facility in the city's financial district, discreet, guarded, and fortified with more tech than a bank. But Cipher had already figured out one fundamental truth. Every system, no matter how advanced, had a flaw. You just had to understand the science behind it. Okay, he muttered to himself, adjusting his notes on the touchscreen panel beside him. Let's break this down. The firm's storage vault was deep underground. Cipher knew from his reconnaissance that the servers were protected by a multi-layered security protocol, biometric access, temperature and motion sensors, and electromagnetic shielding. The vault also had a dead man's trigger. If power was cut or the biometric scanner failed authentication 3 times, the servers would lock permanently and flood with magnetic pulses, wiping all data clean. That meant there was zero room for error. Cipher outlined the steps on a whiteboard behind him, drawing out a flowchart with the efficiency of a scientist preparing for launch. Step 1. Access the building undetected. Reese had scouted the location and found that the only viable entry point was through the subbasement delivery dock. It had a blind spot in the security cameras, just a 2-second window when the freight elevator doors closed before the next camera picked up again. Cipher had already designed a plan to exploit that. He'd built a signal loop device using a modified ESP32 microcontroller and a cloned RFID tag from one of the building's delivery drivers. He'd lifted it the day before with a magnetized wallet snatcher while posing as a food courier. Once the loop was active, it would transmit a clean RFID signal every 5 seconds, tricking the system into thinking the same driver was entering again and again, effectively confusing the logs. But that only gets us in, Cipher whispered, eyes narrowing. The real magic happens underground. Step 2. Infiltrate the vault hallway. There were heat sensors and IR lasers covering the narrow corridor leading to the vault. Cipher knew walking through it meant instant detection. That's where his thermal displacement rig came in. He had built a rig using 2 compact liquid nitrogen canisters, connected to a backpack outfitted with micro-tubing. When activated, it would cool his body surface temperature by several degrees, enough to appear on thermal sensors as no different from the ambient environment. Most thieves would rely on timing or brute force. Cipher relied on physics. But there was still the matter of the lasers, thin, invisible lines of light that could trigger alarms with even the slightest disturbance. Cipher had found a solution in photonic deflection. Using a compound he synthesized himself, colloidal silica suspended in a glycerin solution, Cipher created a fine mist spray that would reflect the laser grid temporarily, revealing it for exactly 5 seconds before it dissipated. Enough to crawl underneath, army style. It wasn't elegant, but it was effective. Step 3. Bypass the biometric lock. This part required both science and a little deception. Cipher knew the fingerprint scanner on the vault's main door didn't store images. It converted prints into encrypted templates. That made digital spoofing harder, but not impossible. The key was getting a live fingerprint sample from the actual authorized user. Cipher had already identified him, Harold Beck, one of the firm's senior engineers. The man had a routine. He stopped by the same coffee shop every morning, always ordered a latte, and always held his phone in the same way, leaving smudges on the case. It took Cipher 2 days to get a clean sample. Using a glass sheet coated in graphite powder and a custom lift polymer, he extracted the full ridge pattern from Beck's print. Then he 3D printed a gel-based replica using a lab-grade printer he'd once assembled from scrap parts. He tested it on a mock scanner at home. The replica worked. But Cipher wasn't satisfied with might work. He needed absolutely will. He took the extra step, coating the replica in a conductive copper nanofilm, which simulated the electrical capacitance of human skin. Now the sensor wouldn't just see the fingerprint, it would feel it. It was ready. Step 4. Extract the quantum archive. Cipher's true target was one of the quantum drives inside the vault, a storage device holding classified schematics for next-gen defense systems. But the servers were on a closed network, protected not only by physical barriers but also by magnetic shielding. Cipher smiled as he flipped through his notebook filled with equations. He had built a small flux-tunneling repeater, a device designed to exploit magnetic anomalies in dense shielding. Using a tuned frequency generator, the repeater would create a narrow window of noise in the shielding long enough for Cipher to plug in a custom-built USB interceptor, extract the data packet by packet, and bounce it to a proxy device placed inside a nearby ventilation duct. No wireless signals. No network trace. Pure analog precision. Step 5. Exit. Silent. Invisible. Cipher's plan didn't end with extraction. That was amateur-level thinking. He had programmed a light-based motion scrambler using pulsed strobe sequences and directional LEDs. Once activated, the lights would flood the hallway behind him, confusing the IR sensors and effectively erasing his exit pattern in real time. By the time security noticed the data was missing, Cipher and Reese would be miles away, the bike slicing through traffic with the stolen drive packed into a shielded Faraday pouch. It wasn't just about pulling off the job, it was about leaving zero trace that the job ever happened. Cipher exhaled and looked around his lab. Every circuit, every device, every detail had been built with intent. This wasn't some thrill-seeking adventure. This was a mission. A message. Proof that intelligence wasn't just a degree on paper, it was a force. A tool. Outside, he heard Reese's knock on the garage door, 3 sharp taps. Cipher opened it and nodded. Everything's ready. Reese stepped in, eyes roaming over the strange text scattered across the room. You built all this? Cipher smirked. I told you. I don't break in, I calculate my way in. Reese whistled. Remind me not to piss you off. Cipher strapped on the nitrogen rig, secured his gloves, and handed Reese a pair of goggles. We move at midnight. Midnight. The city was asleep, or at least pretending to be. Downtown, the streetlights hummed softly, their pale glow painting the asphalt in pools of yellow. Traffic was light, and the financial district, so alive in the day, now felt like a hushed cathedral of glass and steel. Cipher and Reese rolled in quietly on the matte black Ducati, its engine modified to run near silent with acoustic dampeners Cipher had rigged himself. They parked a block away from the Target building, just behind a row of dumpsters beside a parking garage. Cipher dismounted, adjusting his backpack rig. Everything he needed was inside: thermal suppression gear, the photonic spray, the fingerprint clone, and the flux repeater. Every component had been tested, optimized, and double-checked. Science wasn't about hope, it was about certainty. He looked at Reese. This is it. No turning back after this. Reese, chewing gum like it was a stress reliever, gave a half grin. Let's go make history. They moved. The delivery dock entrance loomed ahead, metal, thick, industrial, and uninviting. But Cipher saw it differently. To him, it was just another challenge. A puzzle. Reese stayed near the perimeter to keep watch while Cipher approached the access panel. He pulled out his microcontroller, a modified ESP32 module wired into a battery pack the size of a Zippo lighter. With a soft beep, the device transmitted the cloned RFID signal from the driver's badge Cipher had snatched days earlier. Access granted. The panel lit green, and the door hissed open. Cipher slid inside, crouched low, slipping into the shadow of a stack of shipping crates. The freight elevator was just beyond, its doors open as if waiting. He dashed across the concrete floor, silent thanks to the rubber soles he'd chemically treated for noise absorption. Once inside the elevator, he triggered the loop device again to simulate a phantom RFID entry. Then, he popped open the control panel. Manual override? Reese's voice crackled through the encrypted earpiece. Cipher smiled, pulling out a folded schematic of the building's blueprint. There's always an override. A few crossed wires, one short circuit, and the elevator began its descent, past the authorized floors, down to level -3. The vault level. As it slid into place, Cipher took a deep breath. Now came the real test. The elevator doors opened with a mechanical sigh, revealing the narrow corridor lined with pressure-sensitive tiles, thermal scanners, and IR laser webs. Cipher didn't move yet. Instead, he activated the rig. 2 canisters of liquid nitrogen hissed softly as the tubes lining his suit cooled his body's surface temperature. On a normal thermal camera, he now blended into the environment like a ghost, an outline with no heat signature. He pulled out the photonic mist spray and walked to the edge of the corridor. A quick press of the nozzle, and the fine solution hissed forward in a concentrated arc. For 5 seconds, the invisible lasers turned visible, thin red beams crisscrossing the hallway like a digital spiderweb. Cipher moved. He dropped low, sliding his body under the first cluster, rolled sideways between 2 beams, and crawled with precise, mechanical discipline. He had memorized the layout down to the millimeter. There was no room for improvisation. At the end of the hallway stood the vault door, a circular steel monolith with a biometric scanner glowing blue. Cipher reached into his side pouch and removed the 3D printed gel fingerprint, coated in the same nanofilm he'd tested for days. He placed it against the scanner. The device blinked, scanned, processed, then clicked open. Cipher exhaled slowly and pulled the heavy door just wide enough to slip through. The vault was colder than he expected. Server fans hummed in a synchronized rhythm, and rows of blinking lights cast eerie glows on the floor. The air was filled with the faint hum of energy. He could feel it vibrating through his bones. There it was, the quantum drive cabinet, shielded by an electromagnetic cage and mounted inside a carbon steel frame. Cipher approached with reverence, like a scientist nearing a breakthrough. He pulled out the flux tunneling repeater, a device no bigger than a thick pen, but embedded with quantum drift resonators and a tuned magnetic pulse generator. He placed it against the shielding. A soft vibration began, barely audible, but enough to disrupt the magnetic balance inside the Faraday cage for a few seconds. Time to move. He opened a panel in the cabinet, inserted his custom USB interceptor, no wireless hacks, just clean, physical data extraction. He clipped a small relay beacon to the ventilation shaft just above the cabinet, where the data would be bounced and stored in an isolated drive he'd stashed earlier during a fake maintenance call, weeks before the heist even began. The data transfer was slow. Cipher kept his eyes on the clock. 90 seconds. "Reese, you good?" he whispered. Reese's voice crackled in his ear. "So far, nobody's noticed. You've got maybe 3 minutes before the cleaning crew arrives on floor 1. Cipher glanced at the data meter. 84%? 92%? Done. He unplugged the device, wiped it with an ethanol-soaked cloth, and placed it inside a triple-shielded Faraday pouch. Then, without rushing, he packed his tools, closed the cabinet, and slid out of the vault. But now, the exit path was no longer safe. The laser mist had faded, and the system had reset. That's where Cipher's final touch came in, his light-based motion scrambler. He flipped the switch, and his backpack hummed. A set of strobes activated behind him, pulsing in a randomized pattern, flooding the corridor with overlapping light signals that confused the motion and IR sensors. For 45 seconds, the corridor was blind. Cipher sprinted through, breath steady, body cool, never touching the walls. He dove into the elevator just as the lights returned to normal. On his way up, he reset the elevator circuit, leaving no trace of override, and reactivated the loop device one last time. As he stepped out onto the street again, Reese was waiting beside the bike, bouncing on his heels like a kid. Cipher pulled off his gloves, cracked his neck, and smirked. "It's done." Reese stared. No alarms. No guards. No trace. Cipher handed him the pouch. Just science. The city's industrial zone was dead silent, except for the soft buzz of a single street lamp flickering like a nervous heartbeat. Cipher and Reese sat inside a rundown warehouse, Cipher's temporary base, where rusted machinery lay like the bones of a dead factory. But tonight it was a lab, a sanctuary, a launching pad. Reese leaned against an overturned metal cabinet, twirling a stolen pocket knife in his fingers. "So, that's it? You just walked in, stole the data, and walked out? No guards, no alarms, no heat?" Cipher placed the Faraday pouch gently on the table between them and unzipped it like a surgeon peeling back skin. Inside was the black USB interceptor, modified, encrypted, and holding exact copies of confidential files from a multimillion-dollar corporate security firm. "Not just walked in," Cipher corrected. "I mapped heat signatures, disabled infrared webs using optical noise refraction, and masked my biothermal signature with an active cryogenic loop. I didn't just break in, I disappeared from their system." Reese blinked. "You're not a thief, man. You're a ghost with a PhD. Cipher smiled faintly. More like a ghost with a science fair trophy and a grudge. He plugged the USB into a secure laptop running a custom OS he'd built himself. As the files decrypted, Reese's eyes widened. "What are we looking at?" Cipher tapped the screen. Employee financial records, bribery trails, encrypted client lists, and backdoor access codes to 3 other secured facilities. All of it? Worth millions on the dark web. "But I'm not selling it." Reese turned. "You're not." Cipher stood, pulling down a cracked whiteboard. He began scribbling with a red marker, drawing diagrams, arrows, formulas, and supply chains like a man possessed. "I don't want money, I want leverage." He circled a name, Caldertech. A defense subcontractor. Makes anti-surveillance tech for federal agencies. But look, through shell companies, they own the security firm we just hit. And they've been selling low-grade jammers to civilians while keeping military-grade countertech for private clients. That's insider crime hiding behind corporate suits. Reese whistled. "So we're not just stealing from the rich, we're exposing their rot?" "Exactly." Cipher's voice was calm, surgical. "We don't just take, we topple." Reese was silent for a long moment, then finally said, This is bigger than anything I've done. I was just snatching wallets. You're talking about a war against a rigged system." Cipher nodded. "And I need someone who knows how to move in the underground. You're not a soldier, Reese, you're a fox. You see corners I don't. But with my knowledge and your instincts, we could rewrite the rules." Reese grinned. "You're making a criminal empire sound like a tech startup." Cipher laughed. "Maybe it is. But one built on science, not smoke." He pulled up another schematic on screen, an underground data auction that was happening in 5 days. A digital black market event where stolen blueprints, spyware, and government blacklists were traded like stocks. Cipher had already infiltrated the forum. He didn't want to sell the Caldertech data, but he wanted the buyers to know he had it. "Why?" Reese asked, leaning over the laptop. Because information is currency, Cipher said. If we control what the underworld sees, we control what they fear. And if they fear us, we never have to hide again. The warehouse door groaned open suddenly, wind pushing it inward. Both men turned sharply. Cipher grabbed a small remote and pressed a button, activating the motion scanners he'd installed earlier. Nothing on the grid. Just wind, he muttered, though his voice was tight. Reese sat back, rubbing his jaw. You really thought this all through, huh? You planned a ghost entry, predicted digital loopholes, hacked heat scanners, and now you're, what? Building a silent reputation? No, Cipher's eyes gleamed. I'm starting a revolution. A long pause. Then Cipher pulled up a second screen, a prototype he'd been designing in private. Reese leaned in again. What is that? A drone. Cipher shook his head. No, it's an adaptive autonomous infiltration unit. Miniature, undetectable, and self-correcting. Think, a future drone that can shift frequency mid-flight, bypass modern radar, mimic surrounding air pressure, and deliver payloads, anything from USBs to EMP pulses. Reese blinked. You're building it? Cipher nodded. 3D printed parts. Nanomaterial skin. EMP-resistant internals. All under development, and all illegal. He turned to Reese. This is just the beginning. I've studied every loophole in modern surveillance, reverse-engineered the logic behind next-gen security protocols, and even found ways to fake biometric signals using redirected neural echoes. What the hell is a neural echo? Cipher smiled. Something you'll learn in episode 3. They both laughed. The tension broke for a moment, but then Cipher's face turned serious. Reese, this will get dangerous. I'm not planning one job. I'm planning a chain reaction. If we do this right, every step we take exposes another weakness in the system. We steal. We reveal. We dismantle. Reese stared at him. You don't just want to rob the powerful. You want to burn their house down. Cipher looked him dead in the eye. No. I want to remind them who built it in the first place. And then, just as the weight of that statement settled, the laptop beeped. A single new message appeared on screen. Encrypted. Untraceable. Anonymous. We saw what you did. Impressive. Let's talk. Reese sat up. What the hell is that? Cipher's heart skipped a beat. Only a few people in the world could break through his firewalls like that. This wasn't some script kiddie or dark web noob. This was someone watching. Cipher stared at the screen. The war had just escalated. He reached for the keyboard. And the screen went black. To be continued. Ready for episode 3? Cipher faces a mystery contact. Is it a threat? An ally? Or something far more dangerous? More future tech. Deeper science. Bigger jobs. More danger.